One day, my African neighbor invited me for a meal. At that time, I was 20 years old, and he was 21. I didn't know then that such a simple invitation would quietly change the rhythm of my life. I had been living in that neighborhood for a while, but my days followed the same routine. Wake up, work, come home, scroll through my phone, and sleep. Life wasn't bad, but it wasn't full either. There was a kind of silence that stayed with me even when the room was noisy. I was in a relationship, yet I often felt emotionally distant, as if I was present only in name, not in feeling. I never spoke about that emptiness to anyone, because I didn't fully understand it myself. My neighbor lived just a few steps away. We had exchanged greetings before. Simple hellos, polite smiles, nothing more. He always seemed calm, respectful, and warm in a way that felt natural, not forced. That afternoon, when he smiled and said I should come over for food, I was surprised by how quickly I agreed. I told myself it was just a friendly gesture, nothing unusual. Still, as I walked back to my place, I noticed a quiet excitement sitting somewhere in my chest. When the time came, I stood outside his door for a moment longer than necessary. I don't know why I hesitated. Maybe I was overthinking, or maybe some part of me sensed that this evening would not be as ordinary as I wanted it to be. When he opened the door, the smell of food greeted me first, warm, rich, comforting. It instantly made me feel welcome. His place was simple but neat, nothing fancy, yet everything felt intentional. We sat down to eat, and at first, the conversation stayed light. We talked about daily life, work, where we came from, and how we ended up living so close to each other despite having very different backgrounds. His voice was calm, and the way he listened made me feel like my words mattered. That feeling alone was unfamiliar. As the meal continued, the conversation slowly deepened, without either of us forcing it. We spoke about loneliness, expectations, and the quiet pressure of being young and unsure about the future. I found myself opening up in ways I usually avoided. There was no judgment in his eyes, only understanding. Every time our eyes met, I felt something shift inside me, something gentle, confusing, and a little frightening. I became aware of how comfortable I felt sitting there. Too comfortable. Time passed unnoticed. And for once, I wasn't checking my phone or thinking about what I needed to do next. I was simply present. That realization made me uneasy. I reminded myself that I was just enjoying good company, nothing more. Still, my thoughts kept betraying me. When the meal was over, neither of us rushed to stand up. The room felt quiet, but not awkward. It was the kind of silence that feels full rather than empty. I realized I didn't want the evening to end, and that thought brought with it a wave of guilt. I thought about the person already in my life, the promises spoken casually but meant seriously. I wonder when exactly I had started feeling so far away from them. Eventually, I stood up to leave. He walked me to the door, thanked me for coming, and smiled in a way that stayed with me long after I stepped outside. As I walked back to my place, the night felt different. The same street lights, the same road, yet everything seemed sharper, more alive. My mind replayed small moments from the evening, words, expressions, the ease between us. That night, sleep didn't come easily. I kept telling myself that nothing wrong had happened. We had just talked, just shared a meal. Still, my heart didn't feel calm. It felt restless, curious, and conflicted. I realized that something had begun, not physically, not openly, but quietly inside me. I didn't know where it would lead. All I knew was that a simple invitation had opened a door I hadn't planned to look behind, and once seen, it couldn't be unseen. After that evening, I tried to return to my normal routine, but something had already shifted. The days felt longer, and the nights felt heavier. I kept replaying our conversation in my mind, not because of anything dramatic that had happened, but because of how understood I had felt. That feeling stayed with me in quiet moments, especially when I was alone. I noticed the distance in my existing relationship more clearly than before. Conversations felt repetitive, almost automatic. I listened, replied, and smiled when expected, yet emotionally I felt elsewhere. I hated myself for noticing the difference, because it made me question things I had once accepted without doubt. I told myself this phase would pass, that I was just overthinking because of a single pleasant evening. But life doesn't always listen to what we tell ourselves. I started running into my neighbor more often, or at least it felt that way. Sometimes it was in the hallway, sometimes outside in the evening. Each time, we exchanged a few words that slowly grew into longer conversations. There was still a clear sense of respect between us, but beneath it was an unspoken comfort that made it easy to stay a little longer than planned. We talked about simple things at first, how the day went, small frustrations, future plans that fell uncertain. Over time, the conversations became more personal. He spoke about feeling like an outsider at times, about expectations placed on him, about wanting to be seen for who he truly was. Listening to him, I realized how similar our inner struggles were, despite our different lives. That realization pulled me closer emotionally, even as I tried to resist it. The guilt started creeping in quietly. I would be with my partner and suddenly feel distracted, my mind drifting to another voice, another presence. I wasn't hiding messages or sneaking around, but emotionally, I knew I wasn't being fully honest anymore. That truth made me uncomfortable. I asked myself again and again whether this was wrong. After all, nothing physical had happened. But deep down, I knew that lines don't only exist in actions. They exist in intentions, too. One evening, we sat outside, talking as the sky slowly darkened. There was nothing special about the moment, yet it felt significant. He shared something deeply personal, something he didn't often say out loud. Without thinking, I responded with honesty of my own. In that exchange, I felt a quiet bond form, something intimate in a way that words alone can be. Later that night, lying in bed, I finally admitted something to myself that I had been avoiding. I was emotionally attached, not in a dramatic, romantic way, but in a subtle, dangerous one. I cared too much about his presence, his thoughts, his reactions. And caring like that, while already committed to someone else, felt like a betrayal, even if no one else could see it. Sleep escaped me again. I felt torn between what felt familiar and what felt true. I tried to convince myself that this connection could remain harmless, that I could control it. But emotions don't follow rules once they've been awakened. The next time I saw him, he said something simple, almost casual, yet it struck me deeply. He said he appreciated how safe our conversations felt, how rare it was to speak without pretending. I nodded, but inside my heart sank, because I felt the same, and I knew that safety was becoming a temptation. In that moment, I understood that I was standing at a quiet crossroads. Nothing had exploded, no secrets had been exposed, but the weight of choice pressed heavily on me. I could continue pretending nothing was happening, or I could face the truth of my emotions and the consequences they carried. As I walked away that evening, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next would change something forever. The realization stayed with me longer than I wanted. It followed me through my days, through ordinary moments that suddenly felt fragile. I began to understand that silence itself can be a form of dishonesty. By saying nothing, by avoiding the truth, I was allowing something unspoken to grow stronger. And the longer it stayed hidden, the heavier it became. I spent a lot of time alone with my thoughts. I questioned myself repeatedly. What was I really searching for? Was it him? Or was it the feeling of being seen, of being understood without effort? I had to face an uncomfortable truth. I had ignored my own emotional needs for a long time, and when someone finally noticed them, I didn't know how to handle it responsibly. Eventually, I accepted that I couldn't keep living in between. Staying in that space was unfair to everyone involved, including myself. The clarity didn't arrive suddenly. It came slowly, after nights of restlessness and days filled with quiet guilt. But once it settled, it felt undeniable. I chose to create distance, not out of anger or rejection, but out of respect. The next time I saw my neighbor, I was honest, not in dramatic confessions, but in careful boundaries. I told him that our conversations mattered to me, but that I needed space to understand my own life and choices. He listened quietly, without interruption. There was disappointment in his eyes, but also understanding. He didn't argue or push. That made the moment harder, yet cleaner. Stepping back didn't erase the feelings immediately. Some nights were still difficult. I missed the ease of our talks, the way time seemed to slow down around him. But slowly, the emotional fog began to lift. In its place came reflection about my relationship, about myself, about the kind of honesty I owe to the people in my life. I realized that infidelity doesn't always begin with a touch. Sometimes it begins with neglect, with unspoken dissatisfaction, with emotional silence. Understanding that didn't excuse my actions, but it did teach me something important. I could no longer ignore what I felt or pretend that everything was fine when it wasn't. In the end, what I gained wasn't a new relationship or a dramatic ending. What I gained was awareness. I learned that emotions deserve responsibility, not secrecy, that attraction isn't wrong, but avoiding the truth about it can be, and that some connections enter our lives not to stay, but to reveal something we've been avoiding within ourselves. Life slowly returned to its rhythm, though it was no longer the same. I carried the experience with me, not as regret, but as a lesson. Some stories don't end with togetherness. Some end with understanding. And sometimes that is the change that matters most.